Hello friends, welcome back to Tutorials in English Literature. While reading literary works of 18th century, we often come across two terms, Whig and Tory. We know that they are two rival political parties. But we, as students of English literature, should know how and why did these political parties origin. What were their agendas? How did they influence contemporary culture and society? And above all, British history. Isn't it? In today's lesson, I shall discuss the history, the difference and important facts of these two political parties, Whig and Tory. Whig and Tory were members of two opposing political parties or factions in England, particularly during the 18th century. The term Whig entered into political discourse during the Exclusion Bill crisis of 1678 to 1681, when there was controversy about whether or not King Charles II's brother James should be allowed to succeed to the throne on Charles' death. Under Lord Shaftesbury's leadership, the Whigs in the Parliament of England wished to exclude the Duke of York, that means the brother of Charles II, who later became King James II, from the throne due to his Roman Catholicism, his favoring of monarchical absolutism, that means king is the supreme, and his connections to France. They feared that if James was allowed to inherit the throne, he would endanger the Protestant religion, religious liberty, and the property of the Protestant. In reaction, a Tory ideology had developed by 1681, which equally loudly supported the monarchy and the church. Now, some fun facts about these two parties. Both names, Whig and Tory, originated as terms of abuse used by their opponents. The exclusionists, that means who supported the exclusion of James II, were nicknamed Whigamores or Whigs, likening them to the Scottish Presbyterians who had rebelled against the established Church of Scotland. The term Whigamore means cattle driver or horse thieves. The supporters of James were called Tories, a name given to Catholic highwaymen or robbers in Ireland. Thus, the Whigs supported constitutional monarchism and opposed to absolute monarchy. The Whigs primarily advocated the supremacy of Parliament, while calling for the toleration for Protestant dissenters. They adamantly opposed a Catholic as king. They opposed the Catholic Church because they saw it as a threat to civil as well as religious liberty and the utter disgrace of reason and human nature. The Whigs played a central role in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and were the standing enemies of the Stuart kings and pretenders who were Roman Catholic. The Whigs took full control of the government in 1715 and remained totally dominant until King George III came to the throne in 1760 and allowed Tories to come back. In this period, which is known as the Whig supremacy, that means from 1715 to 1760, the Whigs thoroughly purged, excluded the Tories from all major positions in government, the army, the church, the legal profession and local offices. In this period, Whigs were associated with new wealth, that is, with the financial interest of financiers and merchants, with the dissenters and urban dwellers. On the other hand, Tories were associated with the old land-owning gentry class, the country squires, and with defenders of the privileges of Anglican Church against the encroachment of the dissenters. You can remember in Addison's De Coverley papers, Sir Roger De Coverley was a Tory countryman and a country squire. The reign of George III, which spanned from 1760 to 1820, brought a shift of meaning to the two words, Whig and Tory. No Whig party as such existed at the time. There was only a series of aristocratic groups and family connections operating in Parliament through patronage and influence. Nor was there a Tory party, only Tory sentiment, tradition and temperament surviving among certain families and social groups. The so-called king's friends, from whom George III preferred to draw his ministers, came from both traditions and from neither. Real party alignments began to take shape only after 1784, when profound political issues that deeply stirred public opinion were arising, such as the controversy over the American Revolution. After 1784, William Pitt the Younger emerged as the leader of the new Tory party, which broadly represented the interest of the country gentry, the merchant class, and official administrative groups. In opposition, a revived Whig party, led by Charles James Fox, came to represent the interest of religious dissenters. That means those who did not conform to the Anglican Church, and industrialists and others who sought electoral, parliamentary and philanthropic reforms. The French Revolution and the wars against France soon further complicated the division between parties. The radicals under Charles James Fox supported revolutionaries of France, whilst the more moderate Whigs under Edmund Burke condemned the revolution and defected to join Pitt's Tory government after the violence of 1794. Ironically, both Pitt and his rival Fox died in 1806, depriving the Whigs and the Tories of their strongest leaders in the same year. By the time the Prince of Wales finally became regent in 1811, he had abandoned his Whig friends. All his prime ministers were Tories. In some 19th century uses of the terms Whig and Tory become somewhat diffuse and functioning as labels for general tendencies in political and social life. In the uses, Whig become a synonym for liberal and Tory for conservative. After 1815 and a period of party confusion, there eventually emerged the conservatism of Sir Robert Peel and Benjamin Disraeli, Earl of Beaconsfield, and the liberalism of Lord John Russell and William Gladstone, with the party levels of conservative and liberals. The conservative carried on the tradition of Tories, and Liberal Party became the flag bearers of Whigs. If we compare the impacts of Whigs and Tory government on the social, cultural and political spheres of England, we have to accept it that England became more progressive and democratic under the leadership of Whigs. The Whigs passed a number of pro-immigration measures and laws to enable the full participation of religious minorities in public life. The Whigs abolished the slave trade in 1807 and abolished slavery throughout the British Empire in 1833. Perhaps most notably, the Whigs passed the Great Reform Act in 1832, which expanded the electorate and made Parliament more representative of the country as a whole. The Whig Party was dissolved in 1868, and the reforming spirit of the Whigs was inherited by the Liberals and the Labour Party. Many of the 20th century's great reforms were in the spirit of Whiggery, such as the 1918 Representation of People Act, which gave women the vote, the establishment of NHS, and the welfare state by the post-war Labour government. So we find that Whigs were more progressive than the Tories. So that's all for today. I hope in this lesson you have learned something new and interesting. If you have any question, then please feel free to ask me in the comment section. If you like this lesson, show some love in the form of like. If you are new to this channel and want this kind of videos more, I request you to subscribe to my channel where you will find this kind of content regularly. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.